We are a panel that we've sort of changed a little bit of the dynamic of what we're going to talk about. It was really focused, but we've changed kind of the theme. It's going to still be around emerging markets, but it's also going to focus on generically around fiber, around internet, around equipment, and data centers. So that's what we're going to focus on. I'm going to pass off to Sally, who's going to introduce herself. My name's Tony Rossabi. This is my 28th PTC, so I'm excited to see everybody here. And then we're going to we have an incredible group here to talk about emerging markets. Sally?
Thanks. I'm Sally Wentworth. I'm the president and CEO of the Internet Society and the Internet Society Foundation. This is my first PTC, so it's great to be here. The Internet Society is a international public interest charity that is committed to a vision that the internet is for everyone. And so for this panel, the work that we do is really focused on deploying and supporting internet infrastructure in developing markets and least developed markets all over the globe.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Alessandro Lombardi. Elea data centers. We run 9 data centers in Brazil with hundreds of megawatts of pipeline. And so we are building infrastructure in the emerging markets.
Great. So good morning. I'm Russ Esmacher. I lead strategy and development for Infinera. Infinera is a slightly more than 25-year-old innovator in the area of optics and indium phosphide and delivering the bandwidth that is required for all the connectivity. Infinera has prided itself on always being an innovative and disruptive company, and the disruption is now happening to us as we are in the process of being acquired by Nokia, which sometime here in the first half of this year.
Good morning. My name is Obinna Isiadinso. I'm the global sector lead for data center investments for the International Finance Corporation, or the IFC. We are the private sector arm of the World Bank Group, and we focus on investing in fast-growing companies in emerging markets as well as infrastructure projects globally. And we're the largest investor in emerging markets in terms of digital infrastructure. We've been investing in digital infrastructure in emerging markets for the past 25 years. And we've been investing in data centers now for the past 15 years. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Great, thank you so much. Just from a format perspective, I think what we're going to do, sorry, what has changed over the last 28 years is I have to take these things on and off. I didn't used to have to wear glasses. We are going to talk for about 40 minutes or so, and then we're going to take some audience participation, some questions. So I'm going to start off here, and we'll start with Sally, just talking about just a little bit about market potential and challenges, and where do you kind of see the opportunity for digital infrastructure growth? There's obviously some challenges in terms of where there's capacity and how you build, but it would just give us kind of a high-level overview, and we'll pass down to the panel of kind of what you see going on in the market today and some of the challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the Internet Society, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at deployment of technology, early internet infrastructure in countries across the globe, and as I mentioned, particularly least developed countries, small island developing states, so kind of the pre-emerging markets in many respects. And things that we look at as we are considering what kind of infrastructure we might be supporting in those countries is obviously looking at the existence of physical infrastructure that provides internet connectivity and what the state of that looks like. The performance of the networks that exist that provide reliable access to users in those markets. The use of basic security technologies and deployment of those and adherence to best practice tells us a little bit about resilience of that market. And then overall market readiness, which is I think something that we'll talk about later. And one of the things that's really important to us as we go into these are markets often without an internet exchange, for example, and that basic kind of infrastructure is developing, not just dropping in technology, but really working with the community on the ground to develop the technical community, the skills, the expertise that's needed, not just to deploy infrastructure, but to maintain it and sustain it over the long run. The existence of a local technical community is really important for these larger investments down the line. These are the people that are going to maintain infrastructure when there are climate challenges or other kinds of security issues and the like. And so we work very hard to invest in that technical community development, connect a local technical community with regional communities like network operator groups, IXP associations, and the like. So, that's where we're focused, and that's where our investments are around the world. And we use those 4 criteria to help us understand with the community what is necessary in a particular market.
That's great. Alessandro, please.
Yes, thank you, Sally, for your words. I would say that when you look at the Southern Hemisphere, which is basically when we say emerging countries, if you see most of them like India, Brazil, Thailand, Africa, most of them are in the Southern Hemisphere. You really, other than what Sally said, you really look at the population. So how many do we have? There are many big, large countries that don't have too many people living there. So it's very important to understand how a market can grow, how a market can have potential. It's important to understand how many millions. For example, Brazil, there are 220 million people living there. India, think about that. And together with that, you really need to have the startup ecosystem, fintechs, and the ability of a community to innovate and to create new projects, new ideas, new companies. And if you put that together, population and startup ecosystem, then you have a market for digital infrastructure, for telecom, for submarine cables, and so that's very important. And that my understanding is that this comes even before the existence of infrastructure, and of course energy availability is very important. But if you don't have the people and if you don't have a community able to innovate, that's challenging.
Please jump in.
Sure. So when I think about the emerging markets and trying to continue innovation, if I were to go back 30 years ago, and we think a lot about Silicon Valley as the place where a lot of innovation was the bit of the cradle. And now I look at where we are able to find extremely talented engineering and development resources are in very non-traditional places. And we've made those investments with those universities, and also making certain that when they finish their education, that they're able to have meaningful work. And again, we heard a panel earlier today that was talking about how attractive it is to come into telecom. A little bit of a tough sell. But when you have backgrounds, whether it's in physics or material science or engineering, being able to make sure you find meaningful work. And the meaning is doing innovation, right? And so we've had a very good luck, not only with India, but in non-traditional places that we did not look at even 10 years ago. And we think this is a great example of the investments being made by the public in these countries, partnering with their universities, and making sure that there's places that are meaningful work and these skills are transferable. And I really give a lot of that credit not only to the public partnerships that we've provided, but also to the good old internet. Right? It allowed us to live, work, learn, sometimes play, and how we consume entertainment. And this has allowed the education to go much further than the traditional, I call it the paper, right, the books, and having to have that type of classical education. And I think AI is only going to make this more exciting for them. So for us, these investments are long-term, but they've already started to pay off over the last 10 years.
Yeah, I would just add, in terms of the IFC, we are the largest developmental finance institution investing in digital infrastructure in emerging markets. And our focus is really twofold. One is bridging the digital divide that exists in emerging markets, as well as ensuring that we're investing in sustainable digital infrastructure. Just in terms of some fast facts, something like 8% of people in emerging markets have access to a computer that they're using at home. And when you look at, for example, the electrification rates, it's below 50%, across most emerging markets, compared to globally, it's more in the 60 to 70% range. And so and actually to give you another statistic, for example, in the Africa region, Africa makes up 15% of the global population, but only has less than 1% of global data center capacity. So there's a significant digital divide globally that needs to be addressed. And when you look at our strategy in terms of the investments that we're looking at, we're looking to address these types of problems. And in addition, every investment that we're making is also not only earning a commercial return because we are commercial investors, but it's also having some developmental impact, whether it's at the country level, at the market level, or within the community. And so when you look at the investments that we've made over the past 25 years, you'll see that common theme. We are looking to positively impact the regulatory environment in our markets. We were the first investor, whether it's in mobile networks, in telecom towers, or in the data center sector, as well as in broadband. So when you look across emerging markets, one of the sort of continuing themes that you'll see is we were one of the first investors across all of those verticals in emerging markets. And we were able to enter into those markets because we have offices in over 100 countries in emerging markets globally. We have shareholders over 100 countries who are shareholders of the IFC and the World Bank as well. And so we've spent a lot of time working with regulators, working with the governments, working with the private sector, looking to develop the regulatory environment that can attract private sector capital, as well as co-investing with financial investors and strategic investors to attract capital into these markets. And so, I would say that in terms of on the IFC side, some of the things that we're looking for when we're looking to make investments in digital infrastructure need to address these types of problems and concerns that we see in these markets.
Thank you. That was great. I mean, I think we get a great understanding of kind of what's out there and how you're looking at evaluating. If we could switch to, capital is always a challenge, right? And there's not ample funds out there, and we look at how we deploy, obviously, efficiently, and how we make, a return on our investment, and, obviously. So I'd like to start, Obinna, if I can start with you, is like when you evaluate, because you're looking at a ton of opportunities coming across your desk, Russ, as you start to say, hey, we want to develop a new product, and then, Alessandro, as you look through and you say, hey, we want to deploy another 100 megawatts, and Sally, when you want to go in, how do you evaluate? I mean, like, capital is not just, there's just not dollars going everywhere. And I think we need to think about, like, what is the criteria that you use when you say, okay, it's time, we're going to invest? And so maybe start with Obinna and then come back this way. But if you could kind of just tell us about the process and what you do going forward.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. I mean, for us, this year is going to be one of our most active years. We've deployed a little over $2 billion of capital in digital infrastructure globally in emerging markets. So we're seeing a lot more activity. And in terms of our investment process, we have a process that really involves making sure that we can get comfortable, well, first of all, identifying the risks that we see, whether it's at the country level, at the investment level, at the sector level. And we have a multidisciplinary team that is involved in our due diligence. We typically will start with some sort of preliminary due diligence in terms of getting to know the sponsor, getting to know the market, and that can happen either from a bottoms-up approach, so our local teams will do some of that initial work, and some of our global teams as well. So I'm a part of our global TMT team based in Washington, D.C., and my particular focus is data centers. And so we'll do some of that preliminary assessment to make sure that this could be a sponsor, this could be a project that fits within the strategy of the country, that fits within the sector strategy globally. If it passes that initial cut, we will then move to obtain some sort of initial approval from our internal investment committees that will then allow us to go out and do due diligence in the market. And when we're doing our full due diligence, and I'm sure many of you are aware, when the IFC is doing due diligence, it tends to be quite thorough because not only are we covering commercial aspects, but we're very keen to make sure that in terms of environmental, social, and governance issues are also being covered as well. So we have in-house engineers who are a part of our investment team, and we're spending a lot of time on the commercial, the operational, the technical aspects as well, and then subject to that sort of all of that due diligence being cleared, we'll then move to our final approvals, which would then allow us to enter into legal agreements before then obtaining some sort of a board approval before making a final commitment. So that's at a high level, that's typically the process that we're pursuing. And we're doing this, we're running multiple transactions, across sectors globally. But it is a very detailed process. And I should say that for transactions that are a bit more complicated, we may need to spend more time. That's the nature of the transaction. If it's something that it's a structure that we've used in the past, it's a company that has very good, strong financial hygiene, it's a market that we're very comfortable with, it could potentially take us less time. So the amount of time that we will invest in the process will reflect the nature of the transaction, the sponsor, the market, and the challenges. But I should say that we're looking to deploy capital, particularly in markets that are fragile, least developed, where our capital can really go a long way. We're still looking to invest in middle-income countries like Brazil, like Nigeria, like India, and like Malaysia. But in addition, those countries that are more fragile, we're particularly looking to have more of an impact in those types of markets as well.
Obinna, just one quick follow-up on that. What I think would be helpful for folks to hear is that I know you said that there might be more investigation and more work in terms of diligence.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that you face? I mean, what are the obstacles? Like what jumps out at you when you say, okay, it's going to require X more time because we found whatever? I'm just curious if you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Tony. And it could really be a combination of several things. I mean, there could be macro issues, for example, at the country level. Maybe the country is going through some challenges. Whether it's economical, there could be currency issues, there could be potentially political issues in that country, and so that raises certain risks that we need to understand and just confirm that we can be comfortable with it, or does it require some additional structuring? It could be at the project level. It could be a greenfield project in a market where potentially there's questions around the nature of the project. Maybe there isn't an off-taker as of yet, but it's a project that we want to support. It could be potentially at the management level. There could be an issue at the management. So it could be a number of things, but I mean, commercially, we're looking for ways that we can structure around these issues so that we can support clients and support these transactions.
Super helpful. Russ, just to kind of come back, it's really around when you're offering a new product, key sort of whatever it might be from a strategic investment, how do you kind of evaluate that?
Sure. So when I opened up, I mentioned that Infinera, his entire history has been an innovative disruptor. So let's talk about the word innovative, right? It sounds fun. But you have to have the core competencies to be able to then partner with your customers to actually solve problems that matter to them. So we call this innovation that matters, right? And it sounds easy, but sometimes not, because just because we can solve a problem, is it needed to be solved? Is it actually going to help them in their network, right? Yeah. We spend in excess of $1 billion a year on R&D and headcount and cost of products we turn and make. And we try to move and make an investment. For us, is it going to solve a meaningful problem that our customers and our shareholders and our employees can all rally around? And then we'll determine, is this actually a market that exists, or are we able to innovate inside of an existing market? So a great example of this, I'm certain everyone here in this room has heard multiple times today, power. And so working with our customers, they came to us and said, obviously, we have a power challenge. And we talk a lot about the length of time to do power generation. It takes 10, 20-year cycles to generate meaningful new amount of power. And those are problems that I'm confident that the grid and the power companies will solve over time. However, we looked at the problem on a different side of the coin, which was can we drop the power? Can we innovate inside of the data centers to meaningfully drop the power? Not 10%, not 15%, more than 70%. And then how long does that innovation take? It did not take very long. And so as an innovative disruptor, we are able to do this because it was in alignment with our core competencies, and we'll make this investment. And because it solves a meaningful problem for the industry, and we believe ultimately will drive more applications and allow data centers to be used a little bit differently. And so we do these big bets as a company, and that allows us, we believe, to actually do, return on investment can be very high, and sometimes these investments don't pay off, but when they are right and they solve meaningful problems, oftentimes not, they do pay off.
Great. Alessandro, when you look for expansion, sort of how do you do that, and where do you spend your time on strategic investment?
As a capital allocator, other than running data center companies, what you were saying about power. Power is kind of obvious. It's the gold rush of this century, probably. Availability of power. I would add to generation capacity, distribution capacity. The grid is so important. That's why we are. For us, it's easy to invest in Brazil because Brazil is rich not only in power generation but also has a well-built energy grid. If you don't have power, even if there's demand, you just cannot do the work that we do, data centers. Mm-hmm. And no compute capacity means no internet, no connectivity, digital divide, and blah, blah. So power is really the things. And then I would add the regulatory environment. And I know we are going to talk a little bit about regulation, but the stability of a country, it is important, meaning that you have to know that this country is going to keep on with innovation and is going to allow companies like us to work. What does it mean? Some Latin American countries are very difficult in terms of assessing the grid. The grid is there, generation is there, but it just takes 4 years. And it's not 4 years, it's 4 years plus 5 plus 6 months, and then another 6 months. Many Latin American colleagues here know what I'm saying. And so these kind of challenges in countries where they are not able to adjust to our need are very hard to invest in.
No, thank you. Sally, I think you have a more unique spin as a nonprofit.
Yep.
Dollars are obviously much more, you want to be much more frugal with your dollars. So it'd be really good to hear kind of as you go into areas that can be costly or make a strategic investment, please.
Yeah, so a key space for us is improving and strengthening the peering and interconnection environment around the world. And so we typically move into places that don't have an internet exchange, for example, and where we can contribute to the early stages of that development. So we're kind of at the early stage of what my colleagues here have spoken about. And what we're trying to do is ensure that through the internet exchange, we see more local content hosted locally in the country. By doing that, we see affordability. The internet, the connectivity becomes more affordable. It's more resilient. It's more reliable. And from there, then we can start looking at deployments out in hard-to-reach communities because you have some of the basics in place. And so our investments are actually quite small in some respects because these are markets that can't sustain a massive IX, at least at the outset. What they need is the initial small investment so they can move along that path of sustainability. But the investment itself is only part of the story. As I said earlier, a key part of this for us is the social kind of engineering that's involved to build a community that can surround the IX successfully. And so it's, my colleagues will often say it's only 20% engineering, it's 80% social engineering as you're trying to convince ISPs to interconnect, you're working with the academic institutions, the regulators, all of that community that has to come together for this to be a sustainable investment over the long term. And so that's the key for us and then what we want to measure and what we do measure over time is that we want to see as the IX gets up and running and as more ISPs connect to it, that we should see about 50% of local content coming back home and being hosted domestically. Mm-hmm. That to us is a really important sign that you've got a more flourishing market, that you can, that connectivity is strong, that things are more affordable and reliable. And we've seen that play out. I mean, I'm sure everyone in this room is aware, off the coast of West Africa in 2024, we had serious submarine cable cuts. Mm-hmm. A number of organizations, including the Internet Society, over the decade prior, had invested in an internet exchange in many of the countries in West Africa. Mm-hmm. So when the cables went down, and they were a part of a technical community. I keep coming back to that, but that was really important because it wasn't the IX on its own trying to figure out what to do. They were part of a technical community within the region that could come together and figure out how to provision lines in order to keep some basic connectivity online while the cable cuts were being repaired. That to us is sustainability and reliability and resilience that makes the market ready for the kinds of investments that we hope follow out of what we're doing.
Thank you, that's great. I kind of want to switch gears. You just brought up sustainability. I want to talk a little bit more about power. As Alessandro, you're talking about the key, and Obinna, you've kind of, as well as Russ, talked about power and the challenges. I think let's talk a little bit about sustainability and kind of what do you need to do? There are more stringent requirements that are coming. There's challenges environmentally. I think we clearly across everybody on this panel, it impacts you. The challenges you've seen with power and land and distribution. So maybe, sorry, I'm actually going to go back this way. Okay. We'll start with you again, and maybe talk a little bit about, because I think you are going into unique markets. Yeah. A lot of these are, if you look across, there's environmental challenges, there's natural disasters and things like that. How do you plan for that, just around that, and just pure sustainability, kind of moving to this greener environment and things like that?
Yeah, it's increasingly challenging, as you said, in the markets that we're in, where in addition to deploying the internet exchange points, as I said, we go out in these harder to reach communities with community-based connectivity, where the market isn't there to drive that connectivity. We try to empower those communities to connect themselves to the internet and build a market for themselves. And part of that, and part of the discussion that we increasingly have with them at the outset is, what is your plan for power and sustainability over the long run? So a lot of the communities will rely on solar energy, particularly in the remote areas, which has actually worked quite effectively. We deployed a community network in Mount Everest over the last couple of years for the Sherpa community, who is unconnected to the internet, despite all the traffic that goes by those communities. And they experienced a series of glacial flooding over the last, more recently in last year. And the reports we got back from that community was that the solar power that they had built into that infrastructure from the outset, from the planning stage, not trying to bring it in later, was critical to them maintaining their connectivity when other areas were not connected. So that is incredibly important. And then if you think about sustainability from a financial sustainability, especially for us as, the work we're doing is through grants oftentimes and through small grants. What we don't want to see is a network dependent upon grants over the long haul, right? We want to see them move along the life cycle from the initial seed funding of grant funding, moving to equity, and then ultimately to a sustainable financial model. And we've done a lot of work thinking about that. So These are really important components for us. What we don't want is to just drop in equipment and drop in financing and then walk away and that not be sustainable for that community. That's the worst possible outcome for us.
Alessandro?
Yes, please allow me to talk a little bit about Brazil. It's a very interesting sustainability case. In Brazil, we have today 8 gigawatt of green power available. Not only generation, but also a grid that can sustain this enormous amount of power. 8 gigawatt, it's really a lot of power to have today. Green power, no countries in the world can say to be even close to that. If you look to the US, for example, you have 20 gigawatt here, 25 gigawatt available, but they're not green. What is available today in the northern hemisphere is what was shut down. It's coal. It's really brown or worse kind of energy. So when you look at the famous NIMBYs, right? So yes, I want to agree. It can be a data center, but it needs to be green. Okay, but we don't have green power here. So let's do in an emerging market. But they burn coal. So, so let them stay with that. We're going to have our clean air here. So I understand that when you look at the emerging market, you really need to make sure that the footprint, the energy source is green. Why this happened in Brazil? Basically, the government 20 years ago, they started investing with subsidies to wind and solar, and they way overbuilt their energy generation, way overbuilt. So prices are now down, are probably 20 to 30% less of energy cost in the US right now, and it's available. And there is, with data centers, a market. There are many players, not only us, but there is all the big players are there. So there is a data center market. And so when you look at the emerging market, you look at a solution of a problem, because in the short term, there's no generation capacity in the US or in Europe, green generation capacity. So in the short term, in the next 5 to 10 years, emerging markets can really be a solution for AI, for these massive deployments. Some of these can be green and can be generated in countries where they built their infrastructure thinking on a future that eventually can. And then let me also talk about water. I think that these data centers still use water as a base of cooling. They need to change technology. We did in one of our 9 data centers. It was water cooled. It's not liquid cooled. It's water cooled, famous vaporizer. They use an enormous amount of water. Brazil has 15% of water reserves in the world water reserve. 15%. It's a huge amount of water. Not only the Amazon forest, the lungs of the world, but also a lot of water. And I understand that our sector should stop using water, even if in Brazil we have a lot of it, to cool our systems, because that it's gonna end.
Great. So sustainability. So I will say, as a semiconductor manufacturer in California, for the last 25 years, there is likely no larger regulated sustainable requirement just to operate. So for us, this was non-optional from the beginning of the company. But however, something we embraced early on as it was the right thing to do. And we knew that for us to manufacture and continue to manufacture the semiconductors in California and then to package them in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania, we had to, this was core to our business. However, it also became relevant about 3 or 4 years ago that it became an important buying criteria for all of our customers around the world. And so when they came to us and said, we want to understand how you score, and we had to then take all the things we do and put them in a way that they could actually score them to make certain that we were doing what we said. And so for us, it was really healthy that we could do this and have the great motivation besides doing the right thing for the business and the regulatory environment of California, was making sure we also inspected all the places we were growing. So if we were going to start operating in an emerging market, we were going to bring these practices with us, and then we were going to extend that. We have extended that to our own suppliers and our contract manufacturers. So the whole ecosystem down. Again, so having this be a key buying criteria has been important for the last several years from our customers, but for us, this has been foundational to our business as we've continued to scale. Because and we're very proud to say that our semiconductor manufacturing uses 100% green energy in California, and we are the only indium phosphide producer in California right now, one of very few in the United States. So for us, this is what we do, and we're very proud to continue this as we scale our business.
I just have one quick question. So how do you, just to branch off on that, sorry, Obinna, I didn't mean to jump in there and kill the rhythm, Tony. But really interesting. I mean, like the fact that you are sort of the leading forefront, how do you get others to adopt that? I mean, how do you jump in and say, hey, we want, because we are, obviously there's been some challenges, Alessandro, with the water. I mean, that's been a big issue with data centers for a long time. The move to liquid cool is fantastic. But I think, these, all of our businesses are eating up a lot of the natural resources. Mm-hmm. So it just, is there an effort amongst the other companies, peer companies, to kind of move toward being more sustainable?
I think as we talk about the U.S. environment, so as the federal government has encouraged the onshoring of semiconductor manufacturing in the U.S. with the CHIPS Act, we're happy to welcome them back. Good to see everybody. It's been 35 years. Welcome back. And for that, we're actually building a new facility. And so as the government subsidies and partnerships have attracted manufacturing back, there's strings attached. You must be able to comply with today's environmental rules and regulations and sustainability, and your customers are going to be scoring it. So as we bring the manufacturing back, in our case expanded, building our new facility, this is what we do for business, right? And you build this into the business model and the equipment that you're sourcing, because there's no just because you bring it back doesn't mean there's no rules and compliance, as well as we call it an advantage, because for us we use this when we work with our customers. They know very clearly that we've been doing this for a long time, and this is part of our business, and I believe they respect it and they welcome it.
Obinna, I think you're going to give great perspective. You're seeing so many things. Like I think you and Sally have sort of this incredible global picture of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I imagine being, a governmental or pseudo-governmental, you have some pretty serious sustainability requirements. Mm-hmm. Love to hear more about kind of what you're seeing, how it's changing, and sort of the forefront of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. I mean, we're looking at the sustainability issue from multiple angles. So for example, in the data center sector, we're encouraging our clients to develop sustainable data centers. We're providing, whether it's a combination of sustainability-linked financing to incentivize developers to build data centers that will be considered, will incorporate various sustainability aspects, whether it's lower PUE in terms of from a design perspective, lower WUE in terms of using less water in the operations of the data center. So that's definitely one aspect that we're pursuing. We're also using blended finance tools, which allows us to potentially take some risks in maybe riskier projects or riskier markets. And so that's another way where we can support the development of sustainable data center infrastructure in more frontier markets. We're also, where we can, looking to encourage developers to build on-site generation so that they can supply the data center facilities with power. I mean, one of the challenges that we see is that in a lot of our markets, there are grid reliability issues. So the quality of the grid is not strong. And in several markets, the markets don't have the availability of renewable energy the way, for example, a Brazil has, or potentially a Kenya may have. And so, where another angle that we are pursuing is, as Russ had mentioned, we're looking at the value chain. And so we're looking at, in many of these countries, not only are we investing in data center infrastructure, but we're also investing in power infrastructure. And so we're going to our power clients, our energy producers, to find ways that we can support energy to data center infrastructure. So how can we invest in more renewable energy in our markets as well? And so that's another aspect that we're pursuing. And whether it's engaging with the utilities, engaging with the IPPs, we're going through various aspects of the energy value chain to find out ways that we can encourage the energy sector to also, as new energy infrastructure or capacity is being brought online in emerging markets, how can we bring on more renewable energy going forward into the future? And so these are some of the ways that we're sort of tackling the sustainability issue. I should say we are a major sustainability coordinator on the financing side, so we do support our clients across infrastructure, both digital and traditional infrastructure, in raising financing that can attract institutional investors who are also looking to invest in companies developing infrastructure that's considered sustainable. So these are some of the ways that we're approaching this issue.
That's great. We have about 7 minutes left. I want to see if there's questions from the audience. Yes. If you could stand up and be really loud, that would be great. Or do we have a mic? Okay, great.
I think you touched upon many issues about sustainability and internet access to the end users. Basically, I'm a development practitioner, and I work in Asia and Africa. Currently, I'm in Uganda. We do a lot of work with the off-grid energy and embedded with the internet solution and in agriculture sector and water, the sector also. But what I do see from the practical point of view, you talk about the affordability, but it's still internet broadband services is very poor in the rural area. Users are not accessing, and it is interfacing with this, the challenge is great. Then other area is like content, and we do a lot of innovation, but still the content is not compatible to the users, So how we can infuse the innovation, designing the appropriate content. Then other area is affordability in terms of financing. You talk about, IFC talk about, but still there is a huge gap, how to bring those financing gap. Then again, the digital device we are talking about, they are not well embedded still at the user's level. So how to make that innovation and more design the internet-enabled devices that user-friendly or make more affordable to them. Yeah. So these are a lot of challenges we can discuss over time, but I can start from here. Yeah. Thank you. And how you are addressing these challenges over time.
Good, thanks. Who wants to start?
Yeah, I'll take the point that you raised in terms of affordability, handset affordability. That is definitely an issue that we are focused on. We do realize that, for example, mobile penetration, for example, in Africa is around 48%. Globally, it's around 78%. So there's still quite a ways to go. And just given the population in Africa of over 1 billion people, there's still a lot of opportunity to get mobile devices into the hands of people on the continent. But affordability still remains an issue. And so that is something that we are pursuing. We are looking to engage, and we are engaging with mobile operators in the Africa region and globally to find ways that we can be supportive to provide financing that will enable the production and the distribution of more affordable devices within our markets. And so Africa is definitely one of those regions, but this would also apply to other regions like Asia, for example, as well. So that is something that we do believe it is important to increase connectivity, increase mobile access in emerging markets globally. And so that's an area that we will continue to pursue financing solutions to help the mobile operators provide more affordable devices in their markets.
Anybody else?
Yeah, obviously the concerns and the challenges that you mentioned are really core challenges that motivate the work of the Internet Society. We've just adopted our 5-year strategic plan, and one of the strategic objectives for us is that people everywhere have an affordable, reliable, and resilient internet. And so that motivates our work. And as I said earlier, really focusing on ensuring that there is this local market for content so it comes home. I can't emphasize enough that when the content is hosted far away from the user, we have increased latency, we have lower resiliency, and it's more expensive. And so really investing in the infrastructure that enables us to bring that content home and then encourages more local content development because they have access to those resources. And then really where we're in hard to reach communities, where incumbents or other operators have not brought connectivity out there, we believe that with a small seed investment and a real investment in capacity building and training, those communities can connect themselves to the internet. We can empower those communities. These are small networks sometimes, but those networks can connect with other networks, and eventually we've seen, and particularly in Kenya, where there is a whole series of community networks that are interconnecting and creating real power in their country. And so that's the work we're committed to. The Internet Society's committed about a little over $30 million over the next 5 years in support of that specific set of objectives.
I will also add to Sally's point that at the IFC, we are investing in creative industries. So we are investing in content production, content distribution companies in emerging markets globally. And so that is an area where we see there's significant opportunity and scope, but there hasn't been significant capital, particularly in emerging markets. And so there is definitely an opportunity for us. And just given the synergies between content and digital infrastructure, it makes sense for us to pursue opportunities in that sector. So that's something that we've started in Eastern Europe. We're looking at opportunities in Asia and Africa. And so we will continue to find ways that we can be supportive of content production and distribution companies in emerging markets globally as well.
We're out of...
Would you allow me?
A few seconds left, go ahead.
Yeah, very quickly, I need to underline the importance of innovation hubs. I've seen in Brazil, southern Brazil, Porto Alegre, Recife, in what an innovation hub can do to a community, to a state, to a country. Because when young people can create in a physical place all together and bring to the community new companies, new ideas, that's really what you need to start having internet connections and then data centers and then submarine cable capacity, and then you start growing and GDP comes very quickly.
We are out of time. I want to thank Russ, Obinna, Alessandro, and Sally. Fantastic panel, super informative. Hopefully you all stay for later panels. There are a few more. And enjoy the rest of PTC. Thank you very much.